Hello, everyone, and welcome to Write the Book, Play the Game, a podcast about the business of being an author. Today, I'm being your cruise director, if you will. I'm Gretchen Schreiber. I'm author of 2 books. And I have, outside of that, I have about 12 years in publishing, and I am joined by Andrea Bartz. Take it
Hello,
away.
friends. I am a thriller writer, the author of 5 books and a New York Times bestseller, and I have about 17 years in publishing, which, wow, do I feel old saying that. And you're like, I have 12, that's so many. No, I beat you by 5 years, which...
You're like, I am already... and for my own thing, I work for Reese's Book Club. I do not speak for the brand of the company. It's my own disclaimer. So if you stuck with us, this is now episode 2, which I feel like is something we just hit on again and again in episode 1 while we were talking about why this podcast, which is, why does the industry run on vibes?
Yes. Where has all the data gone?
Truly. And why don't we have data? And I think, anyway, before I get lost, before we get into the topic, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff we'll get into, do we want to just go over any quick terminology just so that everybody, whatever level you are entering at, here's the level set of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So if this is all old news to you and you've been in this industry a long time, to just hit that little skip ahead button. We'll be back in 20 seconds.
Exactly.
All right, what do we want to make sure that everyone's speaking the same language on?
I mean, in publishing, I think it's marketing is anything that is paid. Publicity is anything that is free, but they call it earned because they're pitching you in all of these things. ROI, you might hear us talk about, which is return on investment.
Royalty statements. I don't know that we need to get as deep as how advances work and stuff, because there's tons of great resources on that. But we're talking about trad publishing here, which is different from indie publishing, which used to be called self-publishing. But it means, you're working with one of the big 5 publishers generally, and you get an advance against your earnings. So then once you start selling books, until you have earned enough in your own portion of the book sales to have hit that royalty amount or that advance amount, you won't see another dime. And then after that, you'll start seeing more money. So hopefully pretty familiar stuff. I feel like the marketing and PR one is maybe the most squishy because I don't know, if I am working with a brand on social media, it's not necessarily paid, but it's not really publicity anymore. In the year 2025, those two have gotten a little squishy, but traditional media, the New York Times book review, is always going to be PR publicity, going on the Today Show, any of that. Whereas paying for an event or, working with a brand, that's generally going to fall in the marketing category.
Yeah. I think it's just always good to just be here's the basic level. I think I said this one time on Twitter, ye old Twitter, and a publicity friend gently stepped in and was I think you're talking about marketing. And I was oh, thanks. Educate me.
I do feel like we should probably give a little disclaimer at the beginning that we will probably misspeak and mix the two up at some point. It's it's I don't know. I listened to a podcast where they were talking about chimps. Was it chimps or gorillas or something? But they kept mixing up monkeys and apes, which apparently are very different, and people got very upset. So I feel like this is my monkey ape thing right now. Forgive us, bear with us. We're just talking about all of it from the author's perspective and what you can do.
Got nothing to give you. Sorry, it's a joke from another podcast that I listened to. But anyway, let's level set at the beginning. I think everyone's favorite question is, how does this industry run? Why does it feel like it runs on vibes? And I feel like the answer is a little bit because welcome to creative industries. It's a lot of spaghetti at the wall, subjective taste from your editor, which I know taste is a hot button word. And I think my biggest thing, again, I pull in a lot of my film background, is that in film, especially in television, we often say that we're in the business of failure. Because in film, it's you could hear 300 pitches. Of those 300 pitches, 30 scripts are going to get purchased. 7 scripts are actually going to go to pilot and 4 shows are going to get picked up. And of those 4 shows, 3 are going to get a back 9, which means they get an additional order past their first order, and then 1 is going to get picked up to series. So like,
Wow.
it's just like a business of failure. In that, like, and that's fine. Like, that's in a completely, like, acceptable, like, there's no, it's not personal when a show fails, right? Or at least in theory. Like, I'm sure that someone out there is like, it was personal for me.
This was my baby.
Correct. But I think a lot of that, like, also applies in publishing, of like, we know that publishing survives off of like its backlist and a really few select, I'm sure everyone can name them, those titles that just instantly sell 1 million copies, right? Like the lottery ticket people. And that's the thing. And everyone else, we're just all trying to be like, I think, as we like to say, we're the middle managers. We're here, we're keeping the company running, we're keeping everything going. But like,
yeah, I think that's well put. And we keep, you use the term lottery ticket, and I feel like that's going to like keep coming up as we speak, because the industry is an industry. Publishing is also an industry of failure, but another way you could think of it is that it's an industry of gambling. Like, there's only 5 big publishers. And so if they put out a ton of books, that means that they're putting out a ton, they're buying a bunch of lottery tickets, right? And they rest pretty comfortably knowing that a few, they're not sure which, they have their guesses, they have a few known guarantees. We know that Dan Brown's next book is probably going to do very well. They have a few guarantees, but they just kind of can sit back at that point, knowing that like they're going to make enough money because they own at least a 5th of the horses on this betting track, to start mixing metaphors. They have a big collection of lottery tickets. And that's why for them, I mean, a publishing professional, and she said this personally, so I'm not going to name her, but she referred to the industry as lazy and profitable, which is sort of a dangerous combination, because it's true, they're making good money. Somebody owns the right to 1984, and that's still making tons of money. The Handmaid's Tale and To Kill a Mockingbird, those are still selling like crazy. And then there's some of the more modern books that we can name that are still selling like crazy. And then every year there's a few lottery tickets that win big. And between all of those, they're doing great. So like, your publisher is doing just fine. And yet it feels like such a different experience when you are one of those other little lottery tickets floating around on the breeze in our vast soup of mid-list. And it can be it can feel quite baffling when you're like, why doesn't my publisher seem to want to sell my book? Why don't they seem to care more about selling my book? So I think it's really important, like Gretchen said, to start with this, like, we're going to level with you. It is a business of failure that is baked into their business model.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I like to talk to like people about is like, there's always that like calculator that I think runs around every 6 to 8 months online somewhere, where it's like, oh, your book needs to sell X amount of money to earn back your advance for your publisher, and then they're making money. And I always go, yes, asterisk. And that is like the process of amortization, which is everyone, like, yes, they pay you a chunk of money and they need to earn that money back. And then you need to earn that money back. It's all like weird and complicated. But think of everyone who touches your book at the publishing house: your editor, your editor's assistant, the marketing, publicity, the production editor, everything like that. All the other profit off your book is amortized or spread across those other people to pay for their salaries, their healthcare, the building that they sit in at the publisher, like
the paper, the physical shipping.
The physical things, all of these things. And it's like, sometimes when people are like, well, I don't understand, like, they're making more money than ever. And I was like, yeah, but we also want things like, we want assistants, which I think is good, to like be paid $55,000 a year starting minimum salary in New York City. Like, yes, that money has to come from somewhere, and that is coming off the back end amortization of our like collective midlist. Like, are we failures or are we not? And I think there's always so much marketing that I think everyone can point to those books of like, well, they did all of this thing and that book like blew up. Why can't they do that for me? And I'm like,
Yeah.
because even publishers don't always know that. Like, I get sent a lot of PR for my day job. And like the number of PR boxes that I've gotten for things that haven't hit, but are at that same level, like nobody ever sees those. So we're
Yeah.
all judging what marketing can and can't do based on its successes alone.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
It's like if like one night you have a dream that like feels prophetic because the next day something happens and so you're like, "Oh my God, I had a prophetic dream." And it's like, but can
I'm
we
now a
talk about
prophet.
every other dream you've had every other night that didn't correlate to what happened the next day? And maybe you're not psychic. Like we're only hearing about a tiny little sliver of them. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because, yeah, to your point, like I think we both know people who had $1 million advances, who had $1 million deals, and it really seemed like there was, a 12-house auction and people were so excited and eager to publish this book. And then when it came out, whatever, 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years later, it didn't take off in any big way. And I mentioned it to somebody outside the industry and they're like, never heard of it. And certainly it's not like the publisher, it could be a lot of things behind it,
Yeah. Oh,
but
of course. Like
of
there are a
course
million,
there's
and
like a ton of different reasons that could happen. But it is interesting how we see, oh, well, that book, they paid a lot for it and it was huge in it. And, so clearly they can make a book big if they want to. It's not that simple.
it's a correlation without causation.
Mm-hmm.
And there are just as many books that I can name that sold for moderate amounts, but then went on to become like bestsellers and launch careers, right? Like that is both the beauty and the frustration of books
Yeah.
and like of creative industries, is that like we're all betting on something and everything is hope until we hit the publication date and we start seeing like data.
Right.
And then we have data, but we don't have data as authors.
Right. Right. We ourselves don't have authors. I mean, and I definitely fall into that latter category because my third book, so my first two books were decent sized deals, but not, anything remarkable. And then my third book was actually a smaller deal because the first two had done fine, but not amazing, not enough to justify even matching it. So it was a smaller amount per book. And then that was the one. I mean, Penguin Random House, like, got lucky with that lottery ticket and made tons of money because that book has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And it was for a relatively small deal. So for them, that was like a low risk, high reward, but there's all sorts of combinations of high risk, high reward, high risk, low reward, like every possible quadrant of that.
And I think when you're in that position of like editor, you are trying to like read the tea leaves of culture and what you love and what you think, like you're being paid that like top dollar for your insight into the market.
Yeah.
And what that like you are divining something and say, oh, here's the things that will like be really great. Here we go.
Yeah.
And I think that like is really like, that's the magic. Like when it works, you're like, this is great.
Yeah.
But it can also, when it doesn't work, and I say work is like when you are not super special lottery ticket snowflake. Like it's really easy as like an author to feel really down about yourself, that like my publisher doesn't like me, I failed, I'm never going to sell something else again. Like I can't believe the number of times that I've been told, oh, your career is determined before your debut even comes out. And I'm just like, that's not true.
That's not true.
Like,
That's patently false. Don't believe anyone who's told you that.
And so I think out of all of this like opaqueness that we're talking about is one of the reasons why we wanted to start this podcast, but also one of the things that we wanted to talk about today specifically is like, how do we be strategic as authors?
Yes.
Like putting on our author hat, how do we be strategic for ourselves, and how do we be strategic for working with our publishers? And then how do we interpret that data? Because data alone without the context in which it lives is bad. And then what do we do with that? And when do
Right.
we pull in other people?
Right. Right.
Right.
Because it is so right. It's like it feels like we're getting too much data and not enough data. We're certainly not getting enough data in the sense of like, who's buying my book? Where are they finding out about it? Where are they buying it from? What
What are the
marketing is working? What marketing
psychometrics
is
of the
not working?
average buyer? Like, I think like, yeah, when we have the data, like there's sales, there's like, I mean, I don't know how Penguin Random House is, but like I get a marketing plan and it's like,
Same.
we'll run Goodreads ads, or like we are going to do Facebook ads, and we're going to do this Goodreads giveaway. And like, you sort of go through the list of things and you're like, okay, 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 okay. And I come from like a very data driven field where we're constantly looking at data and trying to like, how can we build better, faster, stronger? And so I would ask things of like on Goodreads giveaway of like, okay, so we know how many people entered the giveaway. Do we have any like psychometric data from them of like, here's all the books that they've added to their shelf. Like these are the books, these are their top rated books. This is, this is what they're reading currently, what they've like interacted with. Like, are they just entering to get a free book, or does it actually look like this would be a reader that we would want to like cultivate?
Right. Demographic info. Yeah. Even basics.
Like, can we see the scatter plot of where they live, of like, oh, everyone is entering from the Midwest. Maybe we would want to tour them in the Midwest. Like, and there's nothing. And I will say, having spoken confidentially, not confidentially because I'm about to share the information, having spoken with several people on the back end of this, like in the marketing department, they don't even have that data. Yeah. So it's not even like they're keeping the data of like the demographic data from us. Amazon, owner of Goodreads, just doesn't give it.
It's like the data all exists and we don't have access to it. My partner is a data scientist, and like nothing blows her mind more than like she just keeps insisting like, no, you're just not looking in the right place. Basically, she's like, no, they must have X. They must be able to figure out Y. They must. And I'm like, no. And everyone who's listening to this understands, because we authors, people look at you like you're out of your mind when you tell them how the industry really works.
Yeah.
Like, no, really.
What are
we
your
don't know
sales?
anything. And like,
what are your sales? And you're like, I don't know.
You're like, I don't know. And they're like, oh, well, like how much, did this person on the New York Times sell? Not necessarily the most books of everyone.
Yeah, not necessarily the most books. Not necessarily the most.
Her face when I tell her these things. And there's a story I like telling when we talk about the lack of data shared with authors, or even necessarily comprehended by the publisher, which is that I have a friend who he had a book coming out, and he had set aside, he had sort of come into this money and had this chunk of money that he was like, you know what, I'm going to directly invest this in my own marketing. It was like 25 grand or something, like a good chunk of change. And he was like, okay, I haven't heard the best things about working with a publicist, so I'm going to, which we can talk about separately in another episode, but I'm going to invest this in marketing instead. So he goes to his publisher and he's like, all right, like, the book, who I'm aiming after, who we're trying to reach. What should I do with this 25K? And they basically handed him a menu of all of the marketing efforts that are sort of in there, that they were able to do. Like you said, Facebook ads, Goodreads giveaway, this, that. And he was like, okay, but like based on who we're trying to reach, like which is going to be the most effective one for me and for this book? And they were like, here is a menu of the things. It was like a non-playable character in an RPG. Like, here is the list of things that you can invest in money in. And he was so blown away that like, this is a business running on vibes. Like somebody you would think in any other business, it feels like they would be able to tell you like, okay, you write this kind of psychological thriller. That's the most popular with women in the Midwest and the South who are 35 to 55. I used to work in magazines. We knew exactly who our reader was. There was tons of market research going on. So, it's not just you. It's not just being withheld from you. Like this is just an opaqueness in the industry that is completely mind-boggling and baffling to all of us.
Which I think is like the difference. And I know we talked a little bit about it in the first episode of like, we're not really talking about indie public, not at all talking about the indie space, but like, I envy indie spaces because you have so much more access to your sales data. So you can adequately track, here was a spike in sales. Was it something I did? Was it a video that took off on TikTok? Like, you can line up the data of like, this worked, double down on this.
Yes.
You know, or like go more for this, or like it was a random video that blew up on TikTok, which is great. I have no control over that. Gonna keep going in the way that I'm doing, in a way that like we as trad authors don't have access to that spike in data. And publishing, because it's a business, isn't just looking at like yes, they have like you and your little silo of like, here's the Gretchen Schreiber silo, and like here's how her books are stacking up against each other, what we think, blah blah blah. But they're also looking at it across a portfolio, right? They're looking at the whole thing. And so they're like, well, we're already in the red here, so like we're not actually going to break down of like, could we go more here, here, and here, because we're already selling so much. If that makes like sense.
Say
like,
more about that. Break that down a little more.
So like, you have like your bottom line as like, let's just like use an imprint for an example. Like the bottom line could be like, we're in the black. We are good to, isn't that, yeah, we're good to go. Like, we're making money. Here we go. That's good. That's what we care about. But when you actually look at like, here is the like sales sheet of how we get to the black, like it could be, here are the 3 titles on our list this quarter, or this, you know, from our backlist or whatever, that are actually holding up the entire list.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they're caring more about the ultimate bottom line,
right,
rather than each itemized line.
Right.
And so like tiny gains, and I say tiny, they feel big to us. I want to make that clear. But like adjustments on the itemized line for them are like, maybe. But like, it's going to have to be a sales margin of like 100+ books.
Yes.
Like, you're going to need to be able to prove we're going to sell 25, 30, 40% more titles by this amount in order to make you start to stand out on the itemized spreadsheet list to get like, which I realized this is all like supposition of like, here's how my business brain would break it down. And when I break it down, I too, as like someone who is in the itemized mid list of like your, like I say this to myself, it's hard and it feels really personal, but it also isn't career defining, although it can be career impacting.
Yes.
As you said, like, you know, which I think then you have to then talk about like, do I need to now, like, do I try it again but do it different? Like, do I want to stay, you said, I want to stay in thriller, I'll take lower money. But you also, could have said, okay, now it's time for a pivot. Would you be willing to like reinvest at a, you know, higher rate or whatever if I pivoted to women's fiction, which is, you know, or book club fiction as it's now called, because we made an entire new genre. You know, like, or would you be willing to go to romance, and like that's going to get you a different like you're going to enter a new system on the line item, and like, am I going to break out, am I not?
Right.
So I don't know if any of that made sense, or just being like, here's the business side of it that really hurts.
Yeah I think this has been like some brutally honest truth that like you said, to move the needle for your sales swings to be relevant, it's on a scale that's much larger than any individual you know event is going to be. Right.
Like, or if it's going to be an event, it needs to be like, there are 500, like, you need to like not just be filling a bookstore, you need to be at the point where they're filling a theater for you.
Right.
And that's when the publisher is going to go, we actually need to double down in this. Like,
we got to send this person on tour.
Like, this is now in fact bigger than what we thought.
Right. And none of this, I feel like I should stress this because some people's jaws are probably on the floor. This is not meant to be demoralizing. This is meant to be honest and candid, and hopefully also empowering in a sense. And I feel like this is a little bit of a hard right turn from our general discussion, but I think it's important to say, like, the metaphor I use is like recycling. Like,
Mm.
I recycle because I want to do something and I don't want the plastic that I have used. I'm trying to reduce the plastic and I'm trying to use glass instead of plastic and that kind of thing. And like, I am aware it is a drop in the bucket. I'm not an idiot. I know that like the real problem is all of these billionaires flying into, Jeff Bezos' wedding. Like, I don't pretend that this is making the biggest difference, but to me, it is empowering to do something and disempowering to say, well, there's nothing I can do and the problem is much too big for me and it's all outside of my hands. But if there were someone who was like, I am so stressed, my life is so much easier if I can just use, paper plates and I know that's less green and it's keeping them up at night, I would say, use the paper plates. Like for you, you are absolutely welcome to remind yourself that like our individual actions are a drop in the bucket and the private planes are really a much bigger issue. So like in a similar way, if it is empowering for you to think about what are all of the individual things that I can do, and we're about to get into those, like what's the data I can collect, how do I act on it, then that's great. If for you that feels overwhelming and scary and infuriating, you are also welcome to say, I don't want to be on TikTok. I don't want to be on TikTok. I want to just focus on writing my books. And to that we will say, that's fine. You go write your books. You don't have to do it because it's probably not going to move the needle in a huge way. So like choose what feels empowering to you. I don't know if I said that clearly, but like we are saying this to give you tools to feel like you're taking control, but not to imply that it is all on you, because that's anytime you talk about marketing things you can be doing. For example, somebody pops up in the comment section to say like, well, why is this on authors? What are publishers even doing if this is supposed to be on the authors? And like you can just go round and round and round and round in that world.
This topic is a little bit like a buffet. Here is all of the choices. Take what you need, leave everything else. But it is important, I think, from a like my own business standpoint, as an author, as like someone who is creative, who like, again, sometimes I need to put the little author in a bed and close the door and then be like, okay, business hat is here. Let's have a hard conversation. Mm-hmm. I think it's important. And like, as you said, it can be empowering to say, I know that my marketing team, I think too often there's the publishing isn't doing anything for me. And to some extent, I know I've seen marketing plans that I'm like, yeah, you need to call your agent. It's time to put that agent on the phone because they're about to like move and shake. But I also think there are some things that we see on marketing plans that I don't think we realize cost money. And like, I at one point showed my marketing plan to a friend who works in marketing and publishing, and she went through sort of like line item by line item and was like, that's $600, that's $1,000, that's $400, like, and just started rattling off. And she's like, this is actually, they're spending a decent amount of money on you. Okay. But like things you don't even know of, like if you get a special NetGalley blast, like that they're like read now or like specialty thing or highlighted, that's a paid for product. Like a Goodreads giveaway, there are 2 types of Goodreads giveaway and they cost 2 different types of money, but like the difference in promo that they get and like what are you trying, like there are so many things that seem, I think, in our heads to be like, that's no money, like that's just an email, and I'm like, that is a $600 email.
Yes. That is an investment. Yeah,
that is an investment. And what they're trying to do is they're looking at it from the like, they're boiling the ocean, and you're looking at it from, I am looking at my pool.
Right. Kiddie pool even.
Kiddie pool even. And it's like, how can I affect my kiddie pool to help me build my brand, build my career, which is outside of any publisher.
Yes.
And the publisher is really concentrating on how do we make money, which is how do we sell the book?
Right. How do we affect our bottom line? Which
again,
the bottom line might not have that much to do with your individual book.
Yeah, which I feel like, okay, so now that we have like that, like what data have you seen? I can talk about the data that I've asked my team for and the stuff that I've gotten versus the stuff that's just very much just not mentioned.
Yeah.
And the stuff that my agent can get versus the stuff that they'll send to me. And I'm like, I love that my agent gets things because, again, sometimes I don't need to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. I have a bad habit of like asking for data and then my agent gets it and just forwards it and then I'm just depressed. So, I mean, we all can see stuff like your Goodreads, how many people have added you to their shelf, their to read, how many people have entered a contest. You can find out if on a NetGalley you're like largely requested. You can sign up for an Edelweiss account if people aren't familiar with that. And from that, that's what booksellers and librarians and other people in that world use to kind of figure out what to order and to order it directly. So you can kind of see, it's interesting because there's info about your book and the marketing plan that is not really author facing. It's meant to be like bookseller facing.
And
So
sometimes you need to see that and it's great. And sometimes you're like, oh.
sometimes you see, yeah, I have a friend who still can recite something in it word for word, something about a recovering from a downward trajectory, and she was like, didn't need to see that. So read with caution. Have something fun planned afterward, but you can see that, you can see the reviews that are coming in, you can see if it's getting much love, as they call it, from reviewers and booksellers.
Which is like then also a good way to see, like, is it being like, if you're getting a lot of indie bookstore love, you can be like, okay, so then let's, do we push for an indie next pick? What does that mean versus a library first reads? Like, there's all those kinds of things.
Yes, you can see what they are considering its comps, the other books that they are comparing it to. It's just a really kind of good little sliver, a snapshot of how your book is being presented, catalog style, to booksellers and librarians.
And also against each other.
Yes.
Like against the other people in your season at your imprint.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. You can sort of start to get a sense of where you are in the catalog, which, again, I find myself somewhere in the middle.
I mean, I started out at the top, but there are a lot of reasons for why that didn't like. I'm very now solidly like, yes, here I am in the middle. It's great.
Here I am deep in the center. If people are willing to do some looking, they will find this.
Me.
So that's fine. You can find out. I asked my agent, what was it called? Distro, I think it's called, like a few weeks before the book came out. I wanted to know what the buy-in had been, basically. And at this point, nobody had mentioned if the book was going to be in Target or Walmart or BJ's or any of those things. And for context, We Were Never Here, my big bestseller, because it was a Reese's Book Club pick, was in all those places. And then The Spare Room, my follow-up, was in a number of those places, I think because those buyers like glanced at their, ledger and were like, oh, her last book did great for us. Sure, we'll order the next one. Well, it didn't sell as well, as is often the case post, bestseller. And so it was via that distro numbers coming in that I discovered that, like, no major bookstores, well, Barnes and Noble, yes, but like Walmart and Target and
they're sort of, they're now like considered, there's a special SKU that they call them, but like Target, Walmart, those sell-ins, like they have like a special designation that I forget.
Okay.
But yeah, like there's like there's when you talk about bookstores of like Indies and Barnes and Noble, and then you talk about like special account, it's like special accounts.
Special accounts.
They don't take every book. They're very like selective. Like for me, Target took my debut novel based on the cover, and I'm guessing the fact that there's a Reese Witherspoon quote on it. But like my editor was pretty frank with me, they probably won't pick up your second because you didn't sell through, and like sell through is a big deal. And I was like, yay, it's fine.
You wanted to find sell through for people?
Oh, so sell through means so they bought a certain number of books from my publisher, and they are expecting that to like sell out. So like what they call is like sell through, like you sold through their order.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they're selling on a consignment model, like all books, like everyone who buys books. It's so absurd. Again, people outside the industry are like, that can't be right. And I'm like, oh, it's right.
Oh, it is. That's why, I mean, again, I feel like we have a contracts and royalty statement episode where it's like, here's how to read this thing.
Yeah.
The number of times I've seen people be like, I've earned out. And it's like, that's your books that are held against return. Just wait.
Yeah. So we'll get into that in more detail later. But selling through means they actually sold the chunk of books that they ordered versus, as is common, they ordered a bunch and ended up returns are high is a phrase that I have heard quite a bit with my last few books. Returns are high of them actually sending back and getting their money back from publishers. But yeah, you can use that distro to sort of compare book to book. Oh, this many copies are going to be out there in the world on publication day versus, oh, it was twice as many or half as much with my earlier books. So those are data points that you can have. What am I not thinking of? What's some other data that you're getting via the world?
I'll go into that data. The one thing I would mention, if you're going to talk to your publisher about sell-in, usually they're not going to have that data until like 6, maybe 8 weeks before pub, especially for like special accounts. So like Walmart, Target, all of them, they won't have that like data until about 2 months out. So if you're like asking them like 4 or 5 months out and they're like, we don't know yet, it's not because there isn't any, it's because they haven't happened. That like that's like
they don't know yet
when you're asking this stuff.
And that's a great point. And also there's stuff that's more qualitative than quantitative, but like, will your book be a book of the month pick? Like, will your book be a Reese's Book Club pick? Will your book any of these? Like, there's different chunks of time, different sort of, is it going to be 6 months ahead? Is it going to be 2 months ahead? Your agent should be able to tell you, like, here's when we'll know X, Y, and Z. And if you want to hear, even if it's a no, you should tell them, because otherwise no one will say anything. In my experience, they just.
No, true. I'm just I'm like, there's like stuff from work that I'm like, even if it's a no,
yeah.
We don't tell no's. We don't give no's.
Right. Like you have, like if you are sitting around wondering like, oh, I know that they pitched it really hard they said they were going really hard for Target, or they said they were going really hard for Book of the Month or whatever, or they said someone's considering it at GMA. If you want an update, let them know, because otherwise I think everyone just quietly hopes that you never ask again and like forgot, in my experience, which I have not forgot personally, but those are sort of, those are things that you also will find out ahead of time.
And I will say, and I think we might end it here and then like start again, because we're almost at 40 minutes for this podcast, and then we'll get into like other numbers. But I think sometimes of like, why are those rejections happening, and why do people just not reject and not say no? And I'm like, well, in part, it's like preserving a business relationship. Like your agent, your editor, your editor, with the seller, like they're going to try and be as like, I don't want to say like intentionally vague, but either like we accept a lot of like a no answer means no, because like you're pushing can then cause friction in a relationship that you need to do 9 times out of 10. And like we can debate the efficacy of like that strategy of like preserving relationships over this one moment of, as all things, there are outliers and there are cases where no, you push anyway.
Right.
But like there's so much about this business, and like when we talk about numbers, that are also like baked in like industry practice.
Yes.
For good or for ill, of like, here is the practice. We are presenting without judgment as much as we can.
Yes, absolutely true. So we're going to come back, and in our next episode, we're going to dig deeper into data that you can ask for, that you can gather yourself, and most importantly, what to be doing with all of that in order to stay afloat in this crazy industry. So thanks for being here, and join us soon.
Yeah.